Welcome back, friends, to The Pulse. I am David Harris Jr. Well, Elon Musk and the DOGE team have massive support from the American people, but the Washington swamp, well, he's making enemies there. Elon claims left-wing mega donors, George Soros, Reid Hoffman, and at the ActBlue organization are funding vandalism at Tesla facilities to intimidate DOGE. Yesterday at the White House, President Trump said the perpetrators will be designated domestic terrorists.
On the floor.
Mr. President talks about some of the violence that's been going on around the country at dealerships. Some say they should be labeled domestic terrorists.
I will do that. I'll do it. I'm going to stop them. We catch anybody doing it because they're harming a great American company. You know, I've stuck up for the NFL. I've stuck up for a lot of American companies and other companies, but American companies. I did a very big favor for the NFL. I do favors for all of it. When you heard an American company, especially a company like this, supplies so many jobs that others are unable to do, when you do that, those people are going to go through a big problem when we catch them. And we got a lot of cameras up. We already know who some of them are. We're going to catch them. And they're bad guys. They're the same guys that screw around with our schools and universities, the same garbage. And we're going to catch them. And let me tell you, you do it to Tesla and you do it to any company, we're going to catch you and you're going to go through hell.
Any company, we're going to catch you. But are we looking at a repeat of the 2020 BLM riots? And what should happen to the people funding and perpetrating vandalism against Elon Musk's companies? Well, joining me now is Vice President of the Government Accountability Institute, Eric Eggers. Eric, thank you so much for joining The Pulse this evening. I agree with President Trump. I think anybody that's trying to terrorize any facility, and especially to just go after Elon because of what he's exposing. Where in the world are these people coming out of the woodworks that are trying to throw shade at or bring harm to and vandalize a company where the owner is trying to save Americans money and expose the waste, fraud, and abuse?
Yeah, it shouldn't be a controversial claim to say that people that commit crimes should be held accountable for those crimes, David. That's basically what Donald Trump said. But I think that it's probably not surprising that the people who are allegedly committing these crimes and trying to intimidate DOGE are linked to the leftist groups like George Soros and ActBlue, who have been recipients, or at least connected to people who've been recipients of that waste, fraud, and abuse for years. You know, we do a thing here at the Government Accountability Institute and on the Drilldown podcast that I do with Peter Schweizer. We follow the money. And for a long time, we've been raising alarm bells about the fact that the 4 wealthiest zip codes in this country are not around Silicon Valley, not around a place that actually produces a product, but it's around Washington, D.C. The America's people are sending their money to Washington, D.C., and it's staying there, and it's going to these pet projects of these Soros-linked groups.
Well, I'm thankful that you said you are following the money. If you guys follow the money, you, the DOGE team, if you guys track the money and find out that there is a George Soros or somebody behind it, can they be liable for criminal charges?
Well, if they're committing acts of vandalism, then they can be held liable for those types of criminal charges. I think it remains to be seen, you know, what the actual connections are. We'll wait and see. You heard Donald Trump say they have cameras. We'll see who commits these acts and what their links are. But I don't think it's conservative groups, right? I don't think that nobody's blaming the Tea Party for this. I think in fact, I think it's fair to suggest that when you have the U.S. Department of Agriculture saying, hey, we're cutting programs that study, you know, trans activism and, you know,
I'm going to get into that.
Farmers. Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is that when you hear examples of the kinds of things that these wasteful programs are being directed towards, and you wonder, well, who's then trying to intimidate the people that are looking into it? I think it's fair to connect some dots and suggest it's people that are linked to these liberal ideologies that would be trying to stop the people from cutting their spending.
Yeah, there's kickbacks going somewhere. DOGE they just keep on uncovering more and new absurd corruption. Watch what the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, said today about what the department that she's now overseeing, what they've been funding.
Until today, USDA was funding a $397,000 grant in the San Francisco Bay Area to educate queer, trans, and BIPOC urban farmers and consumers about food justice and values-aligned markets. By stopping this wasteful spending here at USDA, we are ending identity politics, and we are refocusing our agency on its core mission of supporting American farming, ranching, and forestry.
Like, who comes up with this stuff? Even the Department of Agriculture was wasting money on LGBTQ programs. Is there any department out there in the government that hasn't been corrupted, in your opinion?
Absolutely not, David. You know, I have 3 kids, and I will tell you their idea of food justice is who gets the last chicken nugget. And, you know, that doesn't cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. That costs like $8 at the drive-thru. So it's just one example of how ridiculous and widespread these programs are. And notice that if it weren't for the companies like, or it weren't for the efforts like DOGE, these things never go away. These things just get written into line items in the government, and we continue to pay for them as taxpayers. Whether it's in the Department of Agriculture. You know, we did a report one time that talked about the welfare fraud and abuse and EBT cards, the old food stamps. And we've actually traced money there that to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars to go to all kinds of people who shouldn't get it, including some terrorist-linked groups. I thought that was as bad as it could get. But in fact, now you hear it's not just people who are attempting to do harm to our country, but people are attempting to do harm to our children through these radical ideologies that people who wouldn't support it are paying for. It's ridiculous, and unfortunately, to your point, I do think it's so widespread. It's in every branch of the government. We saw a report that the military is having to cut spending. They're spending millions of dollars to train soldiers, David, on how to have DEI-related conversations with avatars. So we have lost the plot completely, and thank goodness for people like Elon Musk and DOGE to help cut the spending.
It's just insane. Avatars. We want to teach you how to have a conversation with an avatar. You got to have a conversation, DEI conversation. It's just insane. I want to read some of these social media posts DOGE just put out about some of the NIH grants that they just canceled. Check this out. $620,000 for an LGBT plus inclusive teen pregnancy prevention program for transgender boys. Are you kidding me? $699,000 for studying cannabis use among sexual minority, gender diverse individuals. $740,000 for examining social networks among Black and Latino sexual minority men in New Jersey. And the list just goes on and on and on. For most Americans, this is more than any of the taxes, all the taxes that they'd ever paid in their lifetime combined. Will anybody go to jail for wasting our money like this, Eric?
I wish they would. You know, the worst part about that, David, is you talk about studying the social networks of these like alternative lifestyle communities. You know, they're just going on people's TikToks and just like seeing how many followers they have. I'm not sure this is like a real ethnographically complex or sophisticated methodology here, because they're just taking these 6 figures with the money and it makes people feel good. No, people should go to jail. But unfortunately, this is actually the most scandalous part about it, David. You just touched on it. This is all legal. This is all stuff that the people we elected signed off on. So unfortunately, people won't go to jail for this because not only are we paying for it, but we voted for people who said, yeah, let's do this thing. That's the biggest sea change that I think the Trump election and the second Trump administration represents, is we are now having honest conversations about our debt and our deficit and the fact that we are spending billions of dollars a day on the interest on that debt, that we can no longer afford to do so. The amount of money we spend on interest, I think, now has passed what our defense spending is. Talk about threats to the American security. So I think we're actually having a real conversation. And those figures or those examples you just cited are important. But the larger conversation, the fact that we're having one as a country about what does it mean to rein in our spending, is an incredibly positive thing. And it wouldn't have happened if Trump hadn't been elected.
No, it would not have happened. You know, President Trump's EPA administrator, he's also doing his part. Let's watch how he says he's been saving billions of dollars at the Environmental Protection Agency.
I've pledged to cut at least 65% of the Environmental Protection Agency's total spending. Working with the talented team at DOGE, I've now canceled over $2 billion in DEI and environmental justice grants. $2 billion. This agency spends nearly $100 million on rent every year for headquarters buildings that have remained overwhelmingly empty. We will pursue efficiencies by reducing our real estate footprint.
And that's what you get when you put somebody like President Donald Trump, a businessman, in the Oval Office as commander-in-chief. He's going to put people in that understand economics and that aren't going to just go along to get along and be okay with the status quo. I would say probably, 25-30% of our national debt has probably been wasted and then compounded interest on top of that, and that's why we're where we're at. What are your thoughts, brother? Final thoughts?
Yeah, can we give a quick shout out to the environmentalism of the Trump EPA director? You know, under Joe Biden, we're literally spending $20 billion to give to groups that are linked to Stacey Abrams that have only been stood up for a year or whatever. Trump's like, okay, that's fine. You can waste billions of dollars on green energy myths and fantasies. We're just going to close the buildings. That's how we're going to shut down our energy footprint, right? Like, we're not going to use any energy because we're just going to close the building that we're paying people that aren't going to. So I think that, you know, it's a common sense approach that resonates with the American people, and it's finally something that the Trump administration, the American people can get behind. That's why it's being so overwhelmingly popular.
And that's why it's being fought by all those Democrats. Eric Eggers, thank you so much for joining the Pulse tonight, brother. I appreciate you.
Always a pleasure, David. Good to see you.